is Richard Lee. I'm with Sound Vitality. I'm the director here and been doing research on how to provide better methods to get into the consciousness of the body and help people to relieve their suffering of all sorts. And today we're going to talk about unconscious reactivity. And unconscious reactivity is basically what's behind post-traumatic stress disorder. When people see a cookie and think, I don't want to eat that cookie, but they grab it anyway and eat it, it's their bodies that have this unconscious desire or need or reaction to eat cookies. And I certainly suffer from that. And so the key here is that this unconscious reactivity is the instinctual nature of our bodies or the memories of our bodies stored in our cells, and it's the principal thing that governs our behavior. We can have our thoughts and our emotions, but they don't have a lot to do with what we do. It is what our bodies want to do that determines what we do. And so we'll be looking at dissolving unconscious reactivity or softening it, making our cells that hold this memory more plastic so that we can then shape desired automatic responses so that our behavior, we will be doing what we're interested in doing. Here is a model for understanding how our behavior works. We get an environmental trigger, whether a cookie that's suddenly placed in a plate of cookies that somebody offers to us, an angry remark that somebody makes, somebody cutting us off on the freeway, a host of things. A perfume can even trigger a migraine, for instance. So environmental trigger causes a response. The body responds with an unconscious reactive response. And then a little bit later, or a quarter of a second later or something, we get an emotional response. We decide how we feel about that unconscious reactive response and decide, I feel uncomfortable about that. Like somebody offered me a cookie and at first I reach out to grab it, then I think, I've already had 12 cookies. I don't want another cookie, and I'm still grabbing for it. And actually the emotional response is aversion to the cookie, and then the justifying thought is, I don't want that cookie. So this is kind of the cycle that we go through that governs our behavior. Now, the unconscious reactivity, how is it stored in the body? This is important to understand. We've heard a lot about the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response and that sort of thing, where we just get something that happens and suddenly we find ourselves reacting, whether ready to fight against or ready to escape from, looking for some other form of safety or relief. Pavlovian conditioning is a principal way in which we basically have our behaviors shaped. In our webinar 2 weeks ago, I told a story about monkeys who got sprayed with ice cold water when trying to get bananas, which shaped a whole response mechanism in the whole tribe of monkeys that they passed on to their descendants or new monkeys coming to the island. We're also going to look at programming mechanisms, ways to reprogram this unconscious reactivity. Okay, first the sympathetic nervous system. There is a central nervous system that runs right down the middle of our spine, and there's a sympathetic nervous system that's separated from the central nervous system but connected by nerve fibers, and it runs along the left side and the right side of the spine. And whereas the central nervous system, the last connection from the central nervous system is to this sympathetic nervous system is in the lumbar vertebrae, about the second lumbar vertebrae. And the sympathetic nervous system controls dilation of pupils, accelerating heartbeat, stimulating sugar, increasing sugar blood levels in the blood, increase in adrenaline. Basically, it gets us going. And it's all unconscious. It all just sort of, it's recorded in this sympathetic nervous system that's separate from our central nervous system, and it just keys us off. And so any of these triggers can happen, and a reaction happens. The sympathetic nervous system is a key to understanding unconscious reactivity. Sympathetic nervous system, what are the qualities when our consciousness is governed by the sympathetic nervous system versus central nervous system? When the sympathetic nervous system, we feel separate from the world, whereas we feel more of a direct connection when our central nervous system is dominant. In the sympathetic nervous system, we tend to think, process things without knowing, and in the central nervous system, we tend more to know things. We're busy in the sympathetic nervous system and have a greater clarity of vision in the central nervous system, and so on. There are all these, and now we're going to look at the individual cell level, the cells of the body. Every cell has Pavlovian memory, which means every cell, in addition to a mouse that can be trained by a tone and a shock to have certain behaviors, every cell of our body can also be trained. It can be trained to produce inflammation and have delayed healing response. And of course, we have the infratonic 9, that is very effective at mellowing out the cells to dissolve these reactions, inflammation, impeded healing. And this is why the cells are most effective or why the infratonic 9 is most effective at reducing pain, relaxing, and accelerating recovery. Now, there are other, beyond that one aspect of cell memory, basically inflammation and impeded response, the cells can learn other things. They contain conditioned responses that react. When somebody cuts us off on the freeway, our whole body reacts. Our emotional desires and aversions don't have a lot of effect on this cellular information, the cellular reactivity. And our thoughts have almost no effect. And you can see that from, like, inflammation. You can think all you want, I want that inflammation and that pain to go away from my hand, or wherever we're feeling pain in our body, but you apply the infratonic 9, and it just dissolves away without our even needing to think about it. So our thoughts don't have a strong effect, or almost no effect. It really is at the physical, electrical, cellular level. It's a part of the research that we've been doing most recently, and why we've developed the new product, the Nesser, that I'm going to tell you about today. Okay, now the serious unconscious reactivity that really interferes with people's lives that we're directing our attention to today can come from childhood trauma, intense emotional experiences, car accidents, being mugged, being yelled at, or all kinds of things that can just be shocking experiences that record strong memories in our cells, reaction patterns. And then we have ancestral patterns. We tend to do what our ancestors did. If you look at it and see what your grandparents and great-grandparents did, you probably find that you do many of the same things without thinking about it or knowing about it. It's most interesting that we carry their habits with us. A good example is I know a family that adopted 2 children, one from Romania and one from Korea. It adopted them when they were just a few weeks old, each of them, or I guess a month old. And the one from Romania loved bread, and the one from Korea loved and insisted on getting rice. So they carried these patterns with them through their ancestral heritage. Instinctual patterns are very similar to ancestral patterns, but it's another way to look at it. That we, like the birds and everybody else, all the animals, have this way of knowing what to do without thinking about it. Just instinctual, we can call them survival patterns or ways of being. Okay, so some of the things the conditions that I have worked with our Nesser equipment, of people who had breakups in their relationships, people who suffered abuse, and in one case, a few cases, dissociation, where different parts of their consciousness were dissociated from other parts of their consciousness. They weren't fully a single individual. Basically, sometimes one personality shows and sometimes another personality shows. Okay, so now the key to our technology, one key to our technology, what are the brain frequencies that really affect this unconscious reactivity? The limbic core of the brain is our emotional center, and when it gets triggered, we have a whole emotional reaction. This is the center where migraine headaches start, and the swelling from a migraine headache, the inflammation of the limbic core is what creates the pressure in the head and the pain and the discomfort. And also if somebody cuts us off from the freeway, this is where it all starts. This is where in the brain. This is where the reactivity is in the brain. And then the emotion occurs out in the temporal lobe. Basically, this is an area where we feel a lot of emotional activity. Now, and the limbic core, when it's running at about 1 hertz, 0.5 to 1 hertz, then the temporal lobe can be highly reactive. But when we speed up the limbic core to around 2 hertz, the temporal lobe becomes calm and quiet. So this is one of the ways that we can get into reactivities. Often people who have strong reactivity related to certain events can't really talk about them. They get distracted, they try to change the subject, they get angry, all this sort of stuff. But if we can raise the frequency of the limbic core, then the temporal lobe comes down and they can stay with the program. They can stick with it. Okay. Now we're on to how do we do this? Okay, so the Nesser you apply to your foot, and it basically increases the electrical charge of your entire body and then decreases it, increasing it in the other direction. So essentially we're charging the entire body to 3 volts and then charging it to minus 3 volts. And we're taking the electrons and putting them into the ground and then bringing them back and applying them to the person. That's the basic technology. And the other part of it is that it's stochastic resonance. And stochastic resonance means we're applying an unpredictable signal to the body, and because it's unpredictable, the body can't filter it out. So that's a part of this technology. Here's how the Nesser affects each cell individually. The cell membrane holds an electrostatic charge, meaning you can put the potassium inside the cell and the sodium outside of the cell and get a voltage, actually a voltage difference between the inside and the outside of the cell. And the cell membrane sustains that voltage. And when we apply an electrical charge to the fluid around the cell, we are changing the electrical voltage across the cell, across the cell membrane. And this goes for every cell in the body. Just by applying it to the bottom of the foot, we can influence this. Basically, apply our unpredictable stochastic resonance signal in the 2 hertz range to every cell in the body at once to shake up their unconditioned reactivity, the unconscious reactivity. This is a prototype of the Nesser, which we just developed, and we plan to have them on the market very shortly. Basically, there's a place for each foot. It's a soft cushion material, and in order to, and when you turn it on, you can do the right foot, and you get a little flashing light, or you can do the left foot, and you get a little flashing light, and that tells you it's running, and it'll run for 5 minutes and then stop. And the 5-minute cycle you'll see is the ideal time. Now, to connect it to ground, like we saw, you snap our grounding wire on, and then we're going to plug this end into the ground. Let me show you what that looks like. Come back to here. Okay, so you just plug it into the grounding hole of any socket. Most sockets have the grounding hole, and that connects directly to Earth. So the electrons from your body will flow through the Nesser, through the wire into Earth and back into your body again, providing this charging of the body and this breaking up of the unconscious reactivity. Okay, now we have another factor, which is we can shake up the unconscious reactivity of all the cells of the body at once. And then what happens? Well, without affirmations, there still is some good effect. So the affirmations are not necessary, but we found that doing affirmations greatly increases the effectiveness and focuses the therapy, the process, on those aspects that we want to release. So an example of a person who's feeling like they don't deserve, and people are however they manifest that in their lives, by saying, I am worthy, while they have their foot on the Nesser, and for 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes afterwards, will cause them to unconscious reactivity to reshape into this affirmation. It's very interesting how this works. If you say the affirmations before you turn on the Nesser, they'll say the affirmations and won't feel anything. But then when the Nesser is on, you ask them to say the affirmations, and they will feel a discomfort in their body. There are particular locations in their body where they feel discomfort. And it's usually along, remember we saw the sympathetic nervous system along both sides of the spine. It might be up in the chest. It might be down in the solar plexus or in the gut. Sometimes it's in the legs and the head and other parts of the body, but very often it's along the sympathetic nervous system. And sometimes the back of the head also, the brainstem. Okay, affirmation. So what we have done to sort of focus the affirmations is to create a whole list of affirmations, categories of affirmations, and then individual affirmations that people might choose. And the list is longer than this. I just put this one on for you to see. I've included the list in our file sharing downloads that you'll be able to download at the end of this program. So that's waiting for you. And the question is, we only want about 5 or 6 affirmations. That's plenty. When somebody is feeling what they're feeling with an affirmation, it takes a while for them to feel it. And as they feel it, they're first going to feel a discomfort with their affirmation. And then they're going to feel it changing. They're going to feel different sorts of things in their bodies as they process the affirmation with the effect of the Nesser shaking up the unconscious reactivity. Interesting feeling process. It's also valuable to repeat the affirmations again a couple times that day and a couple times the next day, because this plasticity of the cells and of the limbic core lasts about 2 days. So by repeating the affirmations from time to time and again feeling what they feel like, the unconscious reactivity continues to reshape. And it's amazingly effective. Okay, now we're to the problem of there are all these affirmations, and what affirmations should the person choose? If the person who's receiving the therapy chooses the affirmation, they will exclude those affirmations. They'll often exclude those affirmations that are most effective for them because they're avoiding them. Unconsciously, they're avoiding that whole area. They don't even want to think about it. So we need a way to, they can choose some of the affirmations, but it's important to go through and select affirmations that are really the best for them. For this, the most appropriate way is kinesiology. And many of you know about kinesiology. If you've been to a chiropractor, very often you will have experienced this muscle testing where he says hold out your arm and he pushes on your arm to see whether it's strong or it's weak. And if your arm is strong, it indicates that whatever question was asked of you is true. And if it goes weak, it then indicates that it's false. In addition, some people will do a pendulum, having the pendulum circle to the right or to the left, and some people do their own fingers, test whether their fingers get strong or weak. Now, it's important to ask a clear thought or question. And in this case, the question will be, is this category of affirmation optimal for this person? Is this category, is this category, is this category? And when you get a yes, then you can focus in and ask, is this particular affirmation good for the person? Basically, ideal to reorganize the person's unconscious reactivity. And with a few minutes of testing with kinesiology, you can come down to 4 or 5 affirmations that will be highly effective. Now, an important thing is that we're dealing with the cells of the body. In kinesiology, we're actually asking the body, the cells of the body, whether they are strong or whether they are weak according to certain questions. Is this good for me? You can do it with food. Is asparagus good for me? Or you can do it with anything. And the important thing is that our bodies know more, often know more than our consciousness knows, than our thinking consciousness, about what our bodies need. Certainly our bodies, when we cut ourselves or have an injury of any sort, our bodies know exactly what to do to heal us. Sometimes they don't do it, but they know exactly what to do. So the point here is that our bodies are very intelligent, and certainly the unconscious reactivity that we're working with is an aspect of misprogrammed intelligence of the body. So the body knows the truth about the best questions, the best affirmations to use. Okay, now there's a question of separation. It's important that we believe that we can ask our bodies. We need to believe that our bodies are intelligent. If we just believe that our intellect is the only intelligent thing in our bodies or in the universe, then we probably can't do kinesiology. And about 50% of the people in the United States can successfully do kinesiology. Probably about 90% of you who are watching this can do kinesiology, partly because you've decided to watch this program and you're interested in sound vitality, which is oriented toward the consciousness of the body. Or the infratonic 9 is all about harmonizing the cells which is a consciousness process rather than a biochemical process. So you'll probably find that you can do kinesiology. I can't do any of these methods. I've tried, but I'm not successful. So I'm going to show you the method that I use. Okay, so for this, I have let's see, we'll do it over here. I have an acupuncture doll, and so I stand up and I ask myself, well, first off, to calibrate, I'll ask my body, show me a yes. And for most people, they will just find themselves gently leaning forward. And then I'll ask, show me a no. And they'll find themselves leaning backwards. And then I can ask, is this particular affirmation or group of affirmations good for me? An ideal for me, or for the person I'm working on? Because our bodies are very smart and even know what other people need. It's remarkable. So this technique can work very well where others fail. So try different techniques and you'll find one that works well. And many of you probably already do the kinesiology. So you know, and others of you can experiment with it. Okay, now we're on to applying the affirmations. First, we apply the Nesser and we say the affirmation. In this case, I am worthy. We say it during the Nesser application, just after the Nesser application. So 5 minutes is how long we're doing the Nesser application. And then for another 10 or 15 minutes, repeating the affirmations. And it's helpful to have somebody repeat them to you. Say, I am worthy. And the person will say, I am worthy. And then ask, where do you feel that? And they feel somewhere in their body where they're feeling some different sensation. And what is it that you're feeling? And so that process is very good to get them focusing on the area of their body where the unconscious reactivity is interfering with them, where they're essentially reacting at the physical level. And then I said, do it, repeating it twice more that day, repeating all the affirmations twice more that day and twice the next day without the Nesser. There's no need for the Nesser for another week or ever. One Nesser treatment is good. With all the people I've worked with, I haven't done more than 3 Nesser treatments. That's 3 times 5 minutes, just 15 minutes of actual Nesser therapy with people is the maximum that I've done. With me, I've done many Nesser treatments because I'm a researcher and I've got to find out what it does, whether it's harmful, whether cumulative effects are valuable. And it seems that you get about 50% of the effect from the first Nesser treatment, and then maybe another 20% and another 15%, and it sort of trickled down. By the time you've done 3, you've gotten most of the benefit of the affirmation or the Nesser treatment. Now, what are the results that we've gotten from the Nesser treatments? In one case, when somebody was having trouble with her voice, she was stuttering, unable to speak. She had previously been a TV newscaster, and then some experiences in her life traumatized her, and she found herself nervous, hesitant, stuttering. And so we did a single Nesser treatment, and she also did some of the infratonic S process, which we talked about on another video. And immediately, the next day, she felt like she could express herself, and over the next week, she was really feeling that her voice was coming back. And a few months later, I followed up with her, and she said, I'm losing it a little bit, some of that. So we repeated it, did 2 more sessions, and after the 5 minutes each session. After the 2 sessions, she was giving talks in front of 200 people. It's just sort of her whole ability to express herself was returning. Obviously, she had it to begin with, and it had been traumatized. We're also going to talk here about deep-seated issues, neurotransmitters, and alcohol, depression, and despair. This expresses well somebody's impression of the Nesser, which I think will be valuable to you. Hello, Richard. It may be too small for you to read, but I'll read it to you. And again, it's on our downloads for you to download if you'd like to. Hello, Richard. As you know, my first Nesser treatment was on November 21st. I felt very mild, pleasant stimulation during the 5-minute treatment. That was 2 weeks before she wrote this report. After the treatment, I worked with the affirmations for an extended period of about 40 minutes. Suddenly, I was in tears, and with my background in hypnotherapy and rebirthing, I thought, pay dirt. I continued to cycle through the affirmations that I thought that I had both prepared in advance and added until I felt neutral and positive. There was an amazing shift in my emotions and feelings, and emotion and feeling-based perceptions about the problematic dating relationship. The history and patterns related to my problematic attachment in this relationship, classic anxious me, him avoidant loop pattern, are related to my history of father-brother abuse. This kind of problematic, deep, painful emotional attachment to a series of Mr. Wrongs has been a baseline in my life, but on a baseline of pain and trauma about the father-brother abuse. The shift that I attribute to the effect of the Nesser treatment that I experienced in my feelings, emotions, and perceptions about the problem of dating has been amazing. I feel clear, detached, and have successfully put this man in the friend with low or remote romantic potential category. Prior to this shift, the relationship has been 10 months of stress. It feels like the Nesser treatment cleared out a deep well of pain that has been at the foundation of this crazy pattern of anxious attachment to avoidant and romantic partners. I feel so much clearer and lighter. This feels like a huge shift, and I have been testing it some, and I believe I am maintaining it. It is hard to describe how profound this feels. I've been working on this deep well and pattern for over 30 years. I have never let go and developed clarity in one of these situations so fast by any other therapeutic method. I think she expressed very clearly the experience that many people have had with the Nesser. Okay, in another case, somebody, after using the Nesser, had been concerned about their neurotransmitter and hormone levels. And in this case, neurotransmitters normalized before and after. She wanted to test to see whether there was a difference. And similarly, the saliva hormone test showed, whereas several were below normal before, most were normal afterwards. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know where there is unconscious reactivity that is interfering with hormone operation. It sort of makes sense that this can, the Nesser can release it. But this is just one test. Okay, now alcohol, depression, and despair. There's one great result. We did a single Nesser treatment, and the person relaxed and let go of a whole lot of unconscious stuff. And she had 9 months earlier broken up with her longtime partner and gone into depression and basically she'd had alcohol issues, and so she stopped doing alcohol back then, but she had continued on with the depression and the hopeless dwelling on the loss of relationship and that sort of thing. And so she got good relief after the first session, but then we did 2 more Nesser sessions, and there's a whole progression of discovery about what was hiding in her inner nature. Okay, so basically the alcohol, depression, and despair case study is again in the file sharing downloads. It's several pages, and you'll enjoy reading it. Okay, now we're ready for our summary. Much of what we do is automatic responses to environmental stimuli, which means that we think in our heads, we feel in our bodies, but we do what our cells did last time. Basically, we're mostly products of conditioned responses, whether it's advertising, whether it's news, whatever conditions us. And certainly a large part of it is a childhood, ancestral. What did our ancestors do? That's the way we live our lives. Okay, unconscious reactivity is dysfunctional responses, reactions we want to eliminate. So we really need to identify, this is how I want to be defined. The Nesser, which we've talked about and I've shown you, dissolves unconscious reactivity, or rather makes our unconscious programming plastic so that it can be reshaped easily. One good example of this is tapping. Was it EFT, TFT, EMDR rather? When you go say an affirmation and then do tapping on different points, you are basically sending a stimulation to the brain. And if you look at many of you are familiar with tapping, that's why I'm using it as an example. If you look at how you tap, it's usually about 2 times per second. You remember that changing the frequency of the limbic core from 1 time a second to 2 times per second is an important component to bringing out greater plasticity in the cells. Applying the Nesser to every cell in the body rather than tapping locally, and also the very unpredictable signal in the range of 2 hertz, but the body doesn't know where it's going to go next, is extremely effective at adding plasticity. Finally, affirmations shape our desired automatic responses in our plastic unconscious. So reshaping the way we live and choosing appropriate affirmations that match our objectives, and more importantly, match what our body really wants. Our body knows what it needs. It knows what it needs to heal, and we can ask our body, what are the ideal affirmations to help dissolve the unconscious reactivity we want to dissolve. We now have completed our presentation. First off, Howard has asked regarding earthing. I believe a lot of our houses are not grounded properly. Can you use a grounding spike outside? The answer is yes. At the same time, the Nesser is designed to utilize the ground in the house and filter out the disruptive qualities of the power that can get into the ground. So it comes out of the Nesser pretty clean. So you don't have to use a grounding spike outside. You can just use the plug indoors. So that's our recommended way. So you're welcome to do the grounding spike. I'm going to turn on the microphone for everybody to speak so that anybody who wants to can turn on their microphone and speak. So if anybody wants to speak and actually has a microphone and wants to ask a question, turn on your microphone and speak and ask a question.
I'm wondering if you could use EFT tapping while you have your feet on the Nesser plates.
You certainly can. the Nesser is like super-powered tapping. And so the tapping it's probably better to focus your attention on the affirmations than on the tapping. Though if you're really good at tapping, you can include that as well.
So you focus on affirmations rather than tapping, but you could do tapping if it doesn't distract you, you mean?
If tapping is just the way you do things, then include tapping. But for most people, tapping will not make any difference.
Oh, okay. So if someone has this machine, you said that you recommend only 3 sessions on a particular issue, but if someone has worked on one issue, like you gave the example, I am worthy, and done 3 sessions on that, then you could use the machine for some other issue? Is that what you're saying?
There's an important aspect here that I left out. I'm glad you asked this question.
Okay.
The right foot, coming back, I'm going to share again. You can do the right foot or the left foot, and they connect with the kidneys. So this is kidney 1 point of the foot. They connect with the kidneys. They connect with the base of the sympathetic nervous system that goes right up to the brain. That's why those points are so important. And the right foot is best for anger issues, for fear issues, and the left foot is very effective for relationship issues, abandonment, betrayal, those sorts of things. So depending on which is your focus, one is better than the other. And what I have done is worked with people with one foot first, usually starting with the right foot, because fear is a big issue, moved to the left foot for their second Nesser session, and dealt with other issues, other affirmations. The affirmations are going to change each time, because we're not really working on an issue, we're working on what the body wants to work on next by using the kinesiology. So the right and left foot become important things. Right foot to deal with fear and anger issues, left foot to deal with sympathetic relationships, abandonment, betrayal, those sorts of things.
So these are like 5-minute sessions, correct?
Right. So your question was, can we do more than 3 5-minute sessions? And 3 to 5 is sort of the recommended maximum for a cycle. That's probably good enough to do in a year, and it's of declining value as you do it more. A big part of the trick of why the Nesser is so effective is because this signal is so unfamiliar to the body. And so if you do it a whole lot, the body gets used to the signal, this frequency range that it's producing, and the Nesser just becomes less effective. So that's really, it's just the most effective the first few times you use it.
So if somebody owned this machine, they could do it 5 times on themselves per year, and then do it on other people as well.
Yes, and you can do it as much as you want on yourself. It's just a declining return. Okay. So you'll find that a whole lot of your unconscious reactivity has dissipated by the 3rd or the 5th time that you've done it. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. You've made this a successful program.